Welcome to Conversations with Dr. Skip Mason,
pastor, preacher, historian, author,
teacher, librarian, archivist, world traveler,
collector, family historian, avid reader, and creator of the popular Vanishing Black Atlanta Facebook page.
But a lot of folks who love history.
Most importantly,
he's our
dad who loves his family and who taught us the importance of our history and having important conversations.
Join him now for this episode of Conversations with Dr. Skip.
Well, let me say good Tuesday evening to all of you. Welcome to another conversation with one of our distinguished families, one of our distinguished bishops, Bishop Joseph A. Johnson Jr. In just a few moments, I will have the opportunity to bring members of the family up for a wonderful conversation about one of the pioneering giants of our church. Let me first acknowledge our senior bishop, Lawrence Reddick, and Mrs. Wendy Reddick, and the College of Bishops and their spouses. And let me thank you all for your tremendous support of this CME 150 conversation. Let me thank Bishop James Walker and Bishop Thomas Brown, chair and co-chair of our CTI committee, and the wonderful Dr. Teresa Duhart for her assistance in making sure that the entire Zion is well informed of all of the activities that goes on in our church. We have had a wonderful opportunity to share with some of the families. On last evening, we shared with the Lockett family, and we honored the memory of Bishop Wallace Lockett. And this coming week, tomorrow, we have the family of Bishop William Henry Graves. Members of his family will come tomorrow and share with us, and we look forward to seeing them tomorrow, Bishop Graves. And then on Sunday, we have the sons of Bishop Caesar Coleman, Reverend Dr. Darrell Coleman. We have the son of Bishop Richard O. Bass, Reverend Dr. Claude Bass. And then we have the Isom brothers who will come and share with us about their dad, Bishop Dotsy Isom. And so I'm so excited. And of course, we have Reverend Norris Curry who will come and share about his father, Bishop Norris Curry. So we have a busy Father's Day week ahead of us. And of course, immediately following my conversation with the Johnson family, we will have the family of Bishop Thomas Lanier Hort. So it is going to be a busy evening. Would you take a few moments to host a watch party, to share this to other groups, CME church Facebook groups and others, so that they might be able to come in and listen to this conversation about one of our great and esteemed bishops. It is my joy now and my honor to bring to you members of the family. Let me introduce to you Mrs. Patricia Johnson Howell, who is the daughter of Bishop Johnson. Let me also introduce to you Dr. James T. Johnson Jr., who is the nephew of Bishop Johnson. And let me introduce to you, last but certainly not least, Reverend Cynthia Johnson Oliver, the granddaughter of Bishop Johnson and the founder of Bishop Joseph Johnson History Project. Let me say good evening to all of you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. So glad to have you here with us today as we share. I tell you, Bishop Lakey wrote these words in his recent biography of the bishops of the church. And let me share. He said, those hearing Joseph Andrew Johnson Jr., the 34th bishop, preach would characterize him as a scholarly preacher. But those hearing him lecture would deem him as a preaching scholar. Both perceptions would be correct, for in his public presentation, whether the pulpit or the classroom, Joseph Johnson brought together the unique fashion, the soul of the Black preacher, and the profundity of sound theology. These are the words of our distinguished church historian that I'm certain that you all know on Bishop Johnson. Uh, Sister Cynthia, so glad to have you on, and I'm just so excited about the work that you're doing, the project. I've seen your Facebook page, but if you would tell us a little bit about your grandfather, his early years, his education, and his early ministry. Would you share that with us, please?
Certainly. And first, just let me say thank you, Dr. Mason, for this wonderful series on the history of the CME Church, and for this invitation on behalf of my family. We are certainly honored and excited to share reflections about our loved one, my grandfather, but also a father, an uncle, and so many many people. And so I'll just say off the bat that I approach this more as his biographer and
Yes.
granddaughter. And someone he passed away when I was at a relatively young age. And so I'm honored to have other family who can reflect on their memories. And so just beginning with his early years, he was, of course, born in Shreveport, Louisiana on Juneteenth. The year 1914.
Wow.
And he was the oldest son and third child of Reverend Joseph Andrew Johnson Sr. And Mother Rose.
Yes.
And you can't really understand Bishop Johnson without knowing about Reverend Joseph Andrew Johnson Sr., who is, yes, pictured there in the middle of his sons. I love that picture. By the way, Joseph Sr. was an itinerant Methodist clergy person and presiding elder who pastored extensively throughout the state of Louisiana, numerous churches throughout the state, and served as presiding elder of the Monroe District. He also served at a church in Kansas City. And so he, as I said, traveled extensively as an itinerant preacher. And it was Bishop Johnson, a young Bishop Johnson, who traveled with him and accompanied him as he preached in churches large and small throughout the state, and pastored churches large and small throughout the state. So Joseph Sr. was actually the inspiration behind the book, The Soul of the Black Preacher. It was observing his father that he first sort of came to understand Black preaching as a phenomenon, Black preaching as a necessary way of handling the struggles, the trials, the poverty, the oppression of being Black in the South in particular, but throughout the United States. Joseph Sr. was a consummate preacher. He was perhaps even more so than my grandfather. I understand that Reverend Joseph Sr. once visited Capers Memorial CME Church in Nashville while my grandfather was pastoring there before he was elected bishop. And Capers at the time was the kind of church that you didn't necessarily shout at. They were trying to be a little more proper for their time. And apparently, Reverend Joseph Johnson Sr., when he was done preaching, there was not a dry eye in the place. And
oh, wow.
There were folks who were at least almost about to shout. Now, whether they actually did, I don't know, but certainly there was that legendary experience. So that's a little bit about his earliest years.
That's great. Can one of you tell us about his brothers? I want to put the picture back up, and can you give us a little history on the brothers, please?
Well, maybe I can speak to that. Uncle Joseph was the oldest male, and my Uncle David Johnson, Dr. David Johnson, Dr. Reverend David Johnson, who at one time was he started out as dean at Texas College.
Yes.
Then he became president at Texas College. And then my father, Reverend James T. Johnson Sr., pastored all over North Louisiana, Mendon, Ruston, Shreveport, Grambling. And I used to ride around Monroe with my Uncle Charles as he did insurance. I understand he was the highest at the time, and I was, I guess, in high school. He was the highest paid African-American insurance person in Monroe at that time.
Wow.
So he was in the funeral, but so they were all accomplished.
Yes, I see that, and also appeared to be very sharply dressed. Was that a Johnson trademark? I read somewhere that they were always immaculate in their presentation.
I was in Africa with the former president, Leon Talver of Southern University, and we were both working with the International African Conference.
Yes.
But my dad's name came up. I mean, I thought he was going to talk about his preaching, but they were talking about how his dressing was so impeccable.
Yeah.
My dad could, what you call, he could really rag. His shoes would shine so much that I could comb and brush my hair in his shoes. But you can see his stuff. But they all, they would all get together on various occasions, and they had a thing about calling each other Buck. That was the term, they called each other Buck. And Patricia, you remember that. And then while they would call each other Buck, they would be rattling change in their pocket.
Wow.
Signifying that, that okay, we got it going on a little bit with the wealth. But that kind of used to tickle me as a growing boy.
So all of them attended Monroe High School, Monroe Colored High School. Is that correct?
Right. I might as well just say it now. This is where Uncle Joseph played football. A lot of people don't know about his athletic background. He was both a great football player and a great swimmer. In fact, all of them, I believe, were great swimmers. When Uncle Joseph was playing football at Monroe Colored High School, they were so good until they actually beat Grambling State University as a high school. Now, this is before the arrival of Eddie Robertson, the great coach of Grambling. Okay. But I could be in circles. I grew up, one of the places we lived was Mendon, Louisiana.
Yeah.
And there was a school called Webster High School. So one day, all of the powerhouse coaches were meeting over at Webster High School. And I happened to be passing by during the break. And then one of them discovered that I was Joe Johnson's nephew.
Yes.
And when that name came up, these were powerhouse coaches, okay? DeSoto High School, Booker Washington High School, Webster High School. And they were talking about how good of a baller he was. And I said, oh my goodness, I can just imagine. He was probably unstoppable. But that's the legacy for his athletic abilities that a lot of people are just not aware of.
Wow, what a tremendous legacy. Mrs. Johnson Powell, would you tell us about your mother and the influence that she had over her sons? And just talk about her for a few minutes, please.
Okay, you want me to talk about my mother?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'd be happy to, because I am the product of both my mother and my father.
Yes.
And the most interesting family folklore that I am aware of is the circumstances surrounding how they met.
Okay.
This happened in the year of 1938.
Okay.
My Aunt Carrie just adored her second grade teacher. And she would come home and brag to her brothers about her second grade teacher, how beautiful she was. Well, that second grade teacher was my mother, Grace. Carrie insisted that her brother meet her second grade teacher, who again was my mother.
Right.
And she introduced them, and 6 weeks later, they got married. And so wow. I'm wondering what went on between those two young people to, light that spark and make them develop that kind of relationship so quickly. So I asked my mother, what kind of lines did Daddy say to you that won you over? And she was reluctant, she demurred, she didn't want to tell me. And then I asked my daddy, I said, Daddy, what was your rap? What did you say to my mom to just win her over so
Right.
quickly.
Right.
And he gave me this phrase, and I never have forgotten it. He said, well, Patricia Ann, I told her the river is wide. I can't step it. I love you, Grace, because I can't help it. And I said, Dad, that's pretty lame, but I guess it worked, you know, and it was probably appropriate for the age and whatnot.
Yeah.
But they stayed married until both of them, of course, died, and they produced 3 children.
Okay.
My brother Joseph was born 2 years later in 1940. My second brother was born in 43. And I was the caboose, the youngest and the only girl. I was born in 48.
In 1948. Now, where were your parents living? Where did your father meet your mother? In what city?
They were in Monroe, Louisiana.
Oh, they were in Monroe. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Now, and I didn't ask you about Bishop Johnson's, his mother. Would anyone of you like to talk about her for a moment, just to kind of give us, we talked about his father, but what about his mother?
Well, she said that we all call her Mother Rose. Now, I'm not very good at tracing the family tree a lot, but I knew general information. We all respected her, and she had a lot of Cherokee blood in her.
Did she? Okay.
And I remember going to see her. She was in a home somewhere in Monroe, I think West Monroe, because we have East Monroe and West Monroe.
Okay.
And the day that I left, and I had a friend with me, because at the time I was at Grambling State University. And when I left out of there, I told my friend, you know, I got a funny feeling. And Mother Rose looked at me kind of strange. And I just didn't know. The next thing I knew, she had died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The home and the place, you know, in West Monroe, I've forgotten what they call it. They call it the place, where we would all gather and have fun. The young cousins would have fun. And Mother Rose seemed to always be dishing out philosophy.
Okay.
Where grandfather was always preaching to us about right and wrong. Mother Rose would be talking philosophically about growing up, you know, and taking care of yourself, how to treat your neighbor, how to treat, you know, how to treat family and things like that.
Yes, yes.
And Mother Rose was also, you know, as the matriarch of the family, a family of 9.
Okay.
From what I understand, she was the disciplinarian. She would be the one who would mete out the punishment. And I remember hearing this story about a time when my oldest brother visited my grandfather and Mother Rose at their home in Monroe. Okay. And he had a baseball, a softball, and he was throwing it against the side of the house. And Mother Rose came outside and said, Joseph, when your grandfather gets here, he's going to whip you good. And so she quickly told on him when Granddaddy got there. And so Granddaddy took him in the house. And so he said, little Joe, I'm going to clap my hands and I want you to scream and holler like I'm giving you a whipping. And so, and that, you know, but that was the 2 of them. Doesn't that sound like the 2 of them to you, James? That something like that would go down? Yeah,
but I witnessed one of grandfather's whippings. I've forgotten who it was. And that one whipping that I observed with that slow belt and preaching in between each strike was enough for me to respect and not to mess up with him.
Well, he didn't have the heart to spank my big brother. So
well, maybe there, but I'm saying I actually witnessed. I would call a name, but I don't want anybody to get mad.
So Sister Johnson Powell, was he the disciplinarian or your mother in your family?
They were sort of even-handed with
kind of even-handed.
Yeah. You know, they had a very egalitarian relationship considering the era. My daddy consistently cooked breakfast for us.
Okay.
Did household chores. He vacuumed. So they were pretty much partners in every way imaginable.
Yeah.
And so sort of informed what I should expect in a mate when I got one. I have a husband now who does all the cooking, most of the cleaning. And I got that idea of what a marriage should be like from just watching the way my mother and father interacted with each other.
Wow. Wow, that is something. That is something else. I tell you, you hit the jackpot. I'm sure he did too, but you got one who can clean and cook.
Oh
That's,
yeah, I
yeah,
think about that. He's a good cook too.
a good cook
But
too, huh?
he doesn't do all the cleaning. I help with the
Okay,
cleaning,
you do
but
some of it.
his forte is the cooking. He does
Wow.
all of the cooking. Yeah.
Well, that's tremendous. So let's shift gears for a moment and talk a little bit about, Bishop Johnson's ministry, pastoring Mays Chapel, Phillips Chapel, and then pursuing his education. Reverend Cynthia, you want to share and talk about that piece for us?
Sure. So
Okay.
he went to Texas College in Tyler, Texas, ordained by Bishop Martin.
Okay.
So his first pastoral assignment was to Mays Chapel in Ruston, Louisiana, in 1938. Now, one of the first things that I uncovered when I started researching his biography was that his first act as a pastor was to conduct the funeral of a man who had been lynched.
Oh my God.
And that it had apparently happened the day that he arrived. He arrived later that night. And he actually was the one to go and claim the body and to conduct the funeral. And this was before he even had preached at the church, his first sermon as a pastor. So that is, one of the sort of amazing aspects of his ministry. And I really believe that it was a defining moment for him.
Yes.
That, drove him to all, because this is before, before any of his doctorates, before his master's degrees.
Right.
And that was his experience.
That's amazing. That's
yeah.
Such a sad story, but it also speaks to the fact that, and you all know best that back in, some years ago, the preacher was really the heart of the community,
Right.
And so for a preacher, to be the one that would go claim that body, and family members would come for direction and support and that kind of thing. What a welcome to the ministry that had to have been for him. And I'm certain life-changing as well. And
right.
So, yes, go ahead.
Well, just I was going to say that the culture of fear that lynching created.
Yeah.
And it's a terrorist act. So it did sort of inspire terror
Right.
In that community. And so, it fell really to the new person,
Mm-hmm.
the new guy in town, to be the one who, might, have the best chance, to go and claim the body and to do all of that. And so, so that was his introduction to ministry.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so he graduated from Texas College, and then he went off to the Olive School for his seminary work, correct?
Yes, he went to Nashville first to be at Phillips Chapel.
Okay.
Yes. And from there, he went to Iliff School of Theology.
Okay.
And while he was there, he was pastor of Cleves Memorial.
Yes.
In Denver.
In Denver.
Right. And he received his master's degree in 1943 and his doctorate of theology in 1945.
Amazing.
And so from there, he went to Phillips School of Theology, which was at the time in Jackson, Tennessee.
It was in Jackson, Tennessee.
Right.
And we have some wonderful images that I'm going to share and put some up from his time at Phillips at Lane College. And you can see him. And I think he's standing next to soon be Bishop Bunton or Murkison. And there's Bishop Hamlet as well. But this is a part of the faculty at the Phillips School of Theology when it was still on the campus of Lane University. And then we have some more wonderful pictures of him with some students. And to the left of him is Bishop Peter Randolph Shine. who was a great bishop. And then, of course, one of the commencement exercises at the Phillips School of Theology. And so, a little more here. And you can see him leading the procession in. And on the stage with, he's where I'm facing far right, and you see Reverend Kirkendall, the tall, who would eventually become Bishop Kirkendall. But, you know, he had a tremendous tenure as the dean and president of Phillips, wouldn't you say?
Yes, absolutely. Now so he was the first dean and president there.
Yes.
And really, you know, sort of taught, you know, this very, very, very early stages of theological education being available
Yes.
to Black preachers. And it was
Right.
actually, right, yes. And so it was actually his desire to get Phillips accredited that led him to apply to Vanderbilt.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, tell us more about how he ended up at Vanderbilt, and let's talk about the Vanderbilt years.
Okay, so he first applied to Vanderbilt in 1951, and I believe he may have been rejected initially.
Okay.
And at the time, the South universities were struggling with the issue of integration. And so in 1953, they went ahead and admitted him because they looked at his credentials, and the only impediment to his application was the fact that he was a Negro, you know, in terms of what the documentation says. And that was the word that they used at the time. And so it took an action from the Board of Trusts to admit him. And so he enrolled in 1953, the first African American to enroll at Vanderbilt. And that was a year before Brown v. Board.
Yeah. And he enrolled in Vanderbilt with a doctorate.
That's correct. He had a doctorate in theology, but he wanted to get the doctorate in New Testament.
Yes.
Because they needed a New Testament professor, doctorate, at Phillips.
That's
so
amazing.
That was a motivation. It was for the school. And so, you know, Vanderbilt was close in proximity. He'd been admitted to other schools, I believe to Yale and some other schools, but, you know, Vanderbilt's proximity to Phillips, and the fact that there was no other degree granting university that he could attend in the area for that degree. So they admitted him, and he in 1954, and they made him take undergraduate classes his first year, even though he already had a doctorate.
That's amazing. That is something else. Something else. Mr. Johnson Powell, do you remember that time? I mean, you probably weren't even born yet, but you know, just. But do you remember your dad talking about being at Vanderbilt and what that was like for him?
Well, you know, I do remember his time at Vanderbilt, and what's most vivid in my mind is two manual typewriters, one that typed Hebrew and one that typed Greek. And all of the walls in every room were covered with books. So my dad was a very, very dedicated student, very focused. You know, he never really came home and talked about elements of discrimination getting in the way of his progress. He talked highly about his professors. You know, he was just, I believe, a history maker who was proud to be in that role and acted like it was an ordinary thing to do. Never boasted or bragged about it, anything like that.
That's amazing. Dr. Johnson, what do you recall about, you know, I know you were fully aware that your uncle integrated Vanderbilt. Was that a big deal?
Well, when I heard that he was at Vanderbilt, I don't know if he was on the Board of Trustees or not. but I'm more familiar with growing up as a little boy, going to his house when he was back in Jackson, Tennessee,
Sure.
from my days. And I guess when the Vanderbilt thing, and I was growing up, and I got away from that. But I just remember Jackson, Tennessee, growing up with him as a little boy, and I know I would go to sleep at my house and wake up at his house between his two sons.
Oh,
I
wow.
got there, I don't know. Somebody had to carry me. But speaking of the Greek, I guess I might as well say this now. I was always amazed at Uncle Joseph's ability to preach to world scholars,
Mhm.
and then I went with him one side of the country where he was hooping. And what would be so funny to me, my uncle would actually start preaching in Greek in the country, and while he was preaching in Greek, people are still jumping and hollering and jumping over with confused. How could a man do that for one? It's like going from hot to cold. And then he went to Russia, to the Kremlin. It's the height of communism. I remember one annual conference. Everybody was shaking his hand. I think it was because they were worried. I don't remember what Nikita Khrushchev or the one that came after him that was in power at that time going to Russia. I kept wondering myself, what in the world is he going to preach about at the Kremlin?
Yes.
You know, because when we were growing up, we just thought they were all atheists. And I found out later that wasn't really true. But I said, how is he going to do that? But the diversity in preaching and hooping and teaching. I even went when he was living on Herman Circle, I believe. He took me to a class where he was teaching on Methodism, and the founder, John Wesley. And in his white shirt and suspenders and tie, that whole hour he didn't sit down. He walked around the classroom. I'm not saying, okay, what's the difference between him teaching in the classroom and then preaching or lecturing in the pulpit? It was the same. It was the same thing. He had the attention of all of those ministers and people who were in that room. I just thought it was amazing. I said, how can a man know that much stuff?
That's amazing. Bishop Thomas Brown.
And I'll say one more thing.
Go ahead.
It's been brought to my attention that one of the popes, I was Pope John Paul, they used to converse on theology.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
Well, Bishop Thomas Brown, who's the presiding bishop of Georgia, and who kind of entered into the ministry under Bishop Joseph Johnson, he tells the story that that during the annual conference, a revival or something, Bishop Johnson would preach, but he would not finish the sermon. He would take them to a crescendo, and then he'll stop. And Bishop Brown said, y'all come back next year and I'll finish the sermon.
I actually remember that one time when he said that, but I'm not sure because I went to just about every annual conference. It was always that way.
Right.
I just know he preached some powerful sermons. And when he died, everybody wanted to get to his library for his sermons. I'm not talking about only African Americans. I'm talking about, white preachers. I remember some of the world councils. I think there was one in Denver, Colorado, where they were talking about trying to merge the churches and stuff like that. And they were at him. They were at him then. Every old school minister, I'm going to say old school.
Okay.
I run across of note, including Reverend Jeremiah Wright and Cornell West.
Really?
And looks. Jeremiah Wright was the first one that. He and our friends, Obama's pastor.
Yes.
And, he said, remember, your uncle had 2 doctorate degrees. I said, wow, I see. And because I always knew about the regular theology degree, but the New Testament thing, I said.
Right.
But and I was at a theological conference, a Black theological conference at Wright State in Dayton, Ohio once. And I was there to present the music. I'm a musician and a music educator. And Cornell West found out that my uncle was Bishop Johnson. He broke away from the scholars who were there just to come and talk about me. And I had to remind him and say, listen, Brother Cornell, I ain't no preacher.
Right.
I cannot talk theology and doctrine with you. I'm just a plain old musician.
Well, I think, and I would not be incorrect, and if I am, somebody can correct me, but I really believe that Bishop Johnson was preaching Black liberation theology long before, Dr. Cone, of course, made it popular and put it into the public vernacular. But from my research and reading, he was preaching Black liberation theology for years, incorporating it into his sermons.
What comes to mind, and I haven't forgotten that sermon. Well, there are two. One was called 20 Black Slaves, and I'll address that. But that needs to be a reassessment of Muhammad Ali.
Okay.
Because when and my uncle preached about this, it was outdoors somewhere in Atlanta. When Muhammad Ali had the nerve to get on national television and say, "I'm pretty."
Yeah.
As we call it, as a colored man, he actually said, "I'm pretty." This was before James Brown, "I'm Black and I'm Proud," and then after that, Reb Brown and Stokely Carmichael came out after them. Uncle Joseph was preaching that stuff back then. So we need to do a reassessment of Muhammad Ali, other than just being a boxer.
Right.
As a world leader, as somebody who stood alone, as someone who addressed the issues, the political issues of the day, as someone that was brave enough to stare down, the U.S. Army in the time, and be willing to give his life. Well, Uncle Joseph used to preach about Muhammad Ali when he first started becoming the champion.
Isn't that something?
Yes.
Wow. This is a note from Robert Stewart. Bishop Johnson was my bishop from 1966 to 1979. The last annual conference before his death, September 26th, was held at the Minden Civic Center, Minden, Louisiana. My home church was the host. His text was stormy weather. Mount Zion CME Church in Minden was blessed many Sundays with his down home preaching. That pretty much sums him up. Just powerful. It is said that when he was at the Phillips School of Theology, and this is a picture of him. This is one of the pictures in one of his classes. This is when it was still on the campus of Lane University, but Bishop Lakey, and you'll hear that in the trailer that we'll show towards the end. Bishop Lakey talks about how all of the preachers, regardless of denomination, would come and just stand and try to get into his class to listen to him, teach. From United Methodist, Pentecostal, the Baptist, and all of those would come in. So he made a profound impact, particularly in his New Testament class. And I know Bishop Thomas Hoyt was just one of his students, and very much inspired him to go into the New Testament, which is kind of why I put the two families together, because Bishop Johnson then being Bishop Hoyt's a teacher. And so when did you all hear, and how did you hear that he was pursuing, or it was talk about him becoming bishop? And would you tell us about his road to the episcopacy?
Well, his road to the episcopacy, began really following his. In terms of Vanderbilt, he received a bachelor's degree in 54, and then received a PhD in 58. So he was the first African American to graduate, and then became the first to receive a PhD.
Amazing.
He later became, in 71, he became the first to be a full member of the Vanderbilt Board of Trust.
Mm-hmm.
He left Vanderbilt when he graduated in 1958. He left Nashville and moved to Atlanta around 1959, 1960, and there he became professor of New Testament at Phillips School of Theology, which is now a part of the ITC, right, in Atlanta. And during that time, I'm told, heard numerous times that he would have standing room only in his classrooms.
Yes.
That preachers who weren't even enrolled in his class would come to hear him lecture. So it was Bishop E. Lynn Brown,
yes,
who talked about the fact that they wanted to walk like him, they wanted to talk like him,
wow,
they wanted to dress like him.
Yeah.
and they definitely wanted to preach like him. So there was sort of a dynamism to his personality. And so he, that really, when his return to Phillips began his sort of the process of him being prepared for the episcopacy in earnest. And so, of course, he ran in 1962, but lost that year.
Okay.
And then he ran in 66, and that was the year that he won, becoming the 34th bishop of the CME Church.
Yes.
But I'm told that his approach was that he preached everywhere, and he would take my Uncle Joe and my father, Charles DeWitt Johnson, with him, all these places that they preached. My Uncle Joe talked about how he remembered these, him preaching, and then always these delicious meals that would follow the church services. But he preached everywhere. He preached lots of places. But then also being the scholar and this professor of New Testament was something that sort of pushed him toward the episcopacy.
Let me bring up another side of what happened when he was elected bishop, because my father and my uncle, were brothers. And I understand, I was not there. They were referred to as the Kennedy brothers, comparing them to John Fitzgerald and Robert Kennedy. So when Uncle Joseph became elected bishop, then he appointed my father to one of the top churches in the conference, which at that time was the Williams Memorial CME Temple in Shreveport, Louisiana. So that's when they started making that comparison. But I know Dad was right there to help him to win that election when he became bishop. My father, Reverend.
That's great. So let's ask this question here. When did he go to the Afro? Y'all got to tell me about this Afro. I mean, this is such a powerful symbol. When men were wearing their hair low cut, but here he is, a bishop of the church with that Afro. I mean, it is just everything we love about Black power and the symbolism. Do you all remember when he grew his hair out?
Well, I can speak to that.
Yes.
We were all going through our Black nationalist phase in the mid 60s through the mid 70s. And I grew out my Afro. It must have been my senior year at Fisk. That was 69.
Okay.
And had great trepidations about going home with this huge Angela Davis style Afro. I did not know how my parents were going to accept it.
Right.
And I got home. This is when we were on Holcomb Drive. Opened the door, and lo and behold, my dad greeted me with an Afro as thick as mine, wearing a dashiki.
My goodness.
And so he was just as transformed and moved by the Black nationalist trends of the day as people in my generation were.
Yes.
And so, we can sort of look at how we have varied over time in terms of our support for the movement.
Right.
Some people tried to change things inside the system, and others wanted to storm the council. And I think my father was actually torn between those two types of ways of dealing with oppression. Of course, he wanted to change things within. He was an integrationist. But at the same time, he supported and understood why some people might want more dramatic tactics. He befriended a local militant back then named Boogaloo. And Boogaloo was a frequent visitor in our home. And at one point, there was a demonstration in downtown Shreveport, and Boogaloo got arrested. My dad went down to bail him out and paid his legal fees. And that sort of harkens back to the same Joe Johnson who preached that sermon over the lynching victim. I think those impulses were always in him. He was not a one-dimensional person. He had a side of him that was an activist, and I believe if he were alive right now, he would be supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm almost 100% convinced of that.
That's powerful. That is powerful. Let's talk about the legacy of Bishop Johnson and the Bishop Joseph Johnson History Project, and then we will close out with the trailer. Reverend, you want to tell us about the project?
Sure. So I founded the Bishop Joseph Johnson History Project in around 2014, somewhere in there. Really to have a place for circumstances like this. We, as a family, get a lot of inquiries about my grandfather. A lot of people wanting to know more of him. People asking for his books and all of that. And but the main impetus was really came from a dream that I had, in which I held in my hands a finished book. And someone called me on the phone and thanked me for writing about my grandfather.
Wow.
And so, that was where the idea of writing his biography came. So, his legacy is, he was not only the first African-American to graduate from Vanderbilt. When he enrolled at Vanderbilt, he became the first to attend any private white institution in the South. And so, we're really talking about someone who was a pioneer in opening the doors of private higher education in the South. He was also a pioneer in terms of opening the doors of theological education for Black preachers in terms of his role at Phillips School of Theology.
Yes.
And he was really one of the early pioneers of Black liberation theology.
Yes.
One of the, if you read James Cone's 2-volume work, the first volume, Bishop Johnson is in that very first section.
He sure is.
Really in that time when Black liberation theology is first being articulated, you see his voice really represented there and really moving that dialogue forward. He did not get the benefit of longevity. And so it would have been interesting to see how he evolved with that. But that is sort of a powerful aspect of his legacy. And so, at this time, I've been researching the biography for some time. The project also expanded into doing a documentary film. And I have a partner that I'm working with to make that happen. And so right now we're just, if I may, just at this point, requesting that if you're watching and you knew my grandfather, or if you have an anecdote to share, or some photographs to share, or memories, or memorabilia, you can reach out. You can visit our website, bishopjosephjohnson.org, or you can email info@bishopjosephjohnson.org. And I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to hear you share your memories for this research project.
Well, we'll make sure that is circulated. Why don't we take a look at this trailer, okay?
Okay.
He had the anointing so that he too had a way of clearing his voice that would command attention in the Holy Spirit.
He became the ideal for most of the young preachers matriculating through Phillips School of Theology. And in fact, I'm told that his New Testament class was so popular and powerful that I think on a Friday, his last class each week, that a lot of the preachers, especially the Baptist preachers of the Atlanta community, would come to his class just to get sermon ideas for the next Sunday morning. He was that erudite and yet so practical in his preaching.
Now, they did not admit him directly into the PhD program. They admitted him basically as a special student and required that he fulfill some undergraduate requirements. So this is someone who already has a doctorate in theology.
And so he's not only our first black undergraduate to graduate from Vanderbilt in 1954, but he goes on and he attains the doctorate in 1958. And I always tell students that what a lonely experience it had to be for him, knowing that he was the first. But I also see him as a visionary, because I believe in my heart of hearts that he knew that once he came, the door was open. And once he came and he proved himself, clearly others were going to follow in his footsteps.
So his emphasis was on, you have to think through the faith, that what you preach is as important as how you preach it. And so his impact was this emphasis on theological training.
So he's right in that early moment of academic black theology, where folks are beginning to say, we need to understand how black religion and black religiosity is a part of the academic study of religion.
I think it's important that you're telling his story and sharing his legacy, because I think too often, if it's not in a time frame that we really hear the name often, it's easy to be forgotten. But we certainly don't want to forget all the things that he's done.
Wow, that was beautiful. And we are so excited. And certainly the church is indebted to Bishop Johnson for his tremendous legacy, his body of work. And I'm grateful to all of you for taking some time out today to come and to share with us some of your personal memories. And we'll make sure that we circulate far and wide the contact information for those who may have information. And certainly I'll be happy to share any of the images that I've been able to find as well to the project. Mrs. Pat Johnson Powell and Reverend Cynthia Johnson Oliver and Dr. James Johnson, I thank you very much for joining us and having this conversation on Bishop Joseph A. Johnson Jr.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. And you all don't go anywhere. We're going to have the Hort family up in just a few moments. But we thank this wonderful family for sharing with us, and we wish them the absolute best. Well, welcome back, my brothers and sisters. That was a wonderful conversation with the family of Bishop Joseph A. Johnson Jr. But now I am delighted as we continue our Father's Day Week Episcopal Legacy conversation. So delighted to bring up the family of Bishop Thomas Lanier Hart Jr. Let me welcome my sugar, my sweetheart.
Can you see me?
I can see you, baby. Can you see me?
Yes.
Are you going to behave tonight?
I'm going to try.
Hey, Thomas, tell it. Can you shift the camera just a little so we can get not back? No. We just there you go. There you go. We just want to see a little bit more of her. We want to see a lot of her.
You want to see a little bit more? You want to see a little bit more of Mom?
Yeah, I want to see a little bit more of my mama Ose. I'm so glad to have you with us and your entire family, and we have some others joining us in a few minutes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. Well, first of all, tell us, where did you meet our Bishop Hart? He wasn't a bishop when you met him, but tell us about how the two of you all met.
I went to Lane College in 1960, and on that campus was Elin Brown, William Graves, and Thomas Hoyt.
Wow.
That's when I first met him.
That's amazing. He was a student there as well.
Well, Bishop Kirkendall had gone to Evansville to preach at Cleves.
Okay.
And when he went there, Thomas Hoyt was at Evansville College.
Okay.
And Bishop Kirkendall said, no, to his parents.
Mm-hmm.
He has to come to Lane.
Oh, wow.
And he came to Lane his sophomore year.
Okay. So what was the campus like during that time? And what he approached you first, or did you approach him first? Was it love at first sight when you all walked by?
No, let me tell you. I have a big mouth. So at Parker High School in Birmingham, Alabama, had 5 scholarships. And all of my friends had gone to all of the regular colleges, all the colleges in Atlanta, Tuskegee, all of those schools. I said, hey, y'all, I asked four other girlfriends. We were honor students. Let's try Lane College. We didn't know what we didn't know what it was or anything. We didn't know where it was. We wanted to go to Lane. So we all went to Lane College.
Wow.
That's how I ended up at Lane College. We had scholarships. But now, to me, the way I met Thomas was, they assigned me, since it was a work scholarship,
okay,
they assigned me to the dining hall. And they didn't know how much I don't care nothing about the kitchen. But they assigned me to the dining hall.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he would come in the dining hall, and he obviously picked up that I didn't like where I was. He must have picked up on it, but every time he would come in the line, he would give me this big smile and, may I have a little more of that? And I just slammed it on his plate. But that's how I got to know him, really know him for the first time.
And that's something.
Because I never met him in Alabama. See, he was born in Fayette, Alabama.
Okay.
Which is a little ways, about 50 to 60 miles out of Birmingham, down by Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Okay.
He was born there. Well, his daddy was Thomas Hoyt Sr.
Yes.
And there he is. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's his father. His father was a CME preacher.
Yeah.
And They moved from Fayette, Alabama to Birmingham, Alabama, which is my hometown.
Okay.
But when he moved, he was a pastor of Trinity in North Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to tell this, I have to skip over a lot of years. And the one thing, when we got engaged at Lane, he sent me a ring in the mail, and I lost it in gym. I had the whole gym looking because it was too big. But anyway, he sent me that ring, and I said, "You mean I'm gonna get a ring in the mail?"
In the mail.
And so we dated for a lot of years.
Yeah, but you eventually got married. Let me put this beautiful picture up here.
We got married, and okay, I told him we were engaged. I told him we are not getting married until I get this degree.
Okay.
He was 2 years ahead of me.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I'm not marrying nobody until I get this degree.
Right.
And so he left Lane College and went to Atlanta, came to Atlanta.
Okay.
He left me at Lane for 2 years.
For 2 years.
Yeah, I was at Lane for 2 years, and I said, we can get married, but it'll have to be 1 day or 1 month or whatever, but it has to be when I get this degree.
Right.
So we got married September 1. I finished in August because I went to summer school to do practice teaching.
Okay.
And so I finished in August, and we went to Birmingham and got married in September the 8th, 1964.
Wow. You didn't waste no time after you finished your study.
I told him I wouldn't marry. I've been engaged. Hey, I've been getting. I said, whatever happens, if you gone or whatever, I'm not marrying you till after I get out of Lane College.
I tell you the truth.
First of all, I told him because I'm gonna probably have to get a job because you want to go to school.
Right. Somebody gotta work. Oh my goodness, that is something. Well, before we go forward, let's talk about Bishop Hoyt's family, his childhood, and his parents. Let me put another one up, and I'm gonna bring your nephew in this picture as well. Hey, Stephen.
Hey, Steve.
I'll tell you what's going on.
Hey, how you doing? Dory and Tom over here.
All right, tell him I said hello.
Good to see you. I'm glad you're on.
Yeah, thank you.
So you told us about well, first of all, let's put this picture up right here. To the skull.
You love that. He looked like a professor then, didn't he?
He looked like a professor then. I tell you.
But you know but you know he was a preacher.
Was he already a preacher?
He started preaching a senior in high school. He was 17 years old.
Oh wow!
Senior in high school, he started.
That's amazing. So let's talk about you mentioned his father, who was a presiding.
His father was senior.
Okay.
Thomas Hoyt Senior. He's Thomas Hoyt Jr.
Reverend Stephen, did you know your grandfather? Did you have a chance to meet him?
I have a vivid memory of him. I think the last time he was in Alabama, he came to Gaston, where we lived, and I grew up there. And I remember him getting out of a cab, knocking on the door, and I actually thought he was an insurance man because he always dressed. And so I told my mother, said some man is at the door. But I can't remember anything after that.
Right.
And the last time he came to Alabama, and I think he may have been sick then.
Okay.
And they wanted to see everybody.
Yeah.
And he wanted to come by and see and visit with us.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So Mama Olsen, and let me put Bishop's mother up. Tell us about her.
Oh, she's a beautiful lady. And we always told him he looked just like his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I met her for the first time, I think, after we got married and went to Evansville.
Okay.
And she was beautiful. I always liked her a lot. And she was very quiet, but very, very nice, smart lady.
Mm-hmm. And Steve, did you get to know her as well?
I did, and she played the piano, and so
yeah, she did.
Absolutely.
Wow. Yeah. Now, this picture, who is this, you all?
That's her mother.
So that's Bishop's grandmother.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Her name is Ida Wells.
Ida Wells. Okay, interesting name. Yes, this was kind of on the, and then here's a sister. This was on a composite that I think Doria sent me.
That's his sister. She's here in Atlanta.
Okay.
Evelina.
Yeah, all of the pictures came off of this. This must have come out of a souvenir booklet or some program booklet for them. And mentioned at that time that he was attending Lincoln High School.
He did. He did. He finished Lincoln High School in Evansville, Indiana.
And so he got his call to preach as a teenager.
Yes.
Wow. That is something.
There he is.
Yeah.
In that picture.
That's
amazing. He and his father.
Amazing. That's just
at Cleves.
Yeah.
Right.
And Skip, I mean, Dr. Mason.
You call me Skip, you know better.
But I was going to say he has two other siblings.
Okay, tell us about them.
My father was Vanderbilt Hoyt.
My God, what a name, Vanderbilt Hoyt.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he said some folk had problem calling him Vanderbilt Hoyt because both of those names are German names.
Yeah.
They would call him anything but Vanderbilt. But that was his name. And then we had my Aunt Annabelle. Okay. And she was next to I think she was the oldest.
She was the oldest.
And then father, and then Aunt Evelina, and then Uncle Thomas.
Thomas was the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Steve, what kind of influence has your uncle had on your life as a pastor?
Yeah, tremendous. You know, when you're growing up and you hear about this young preacher, scholar by the name of Thomas Hoyt, and you know, and of course, my memory of him growing up is, you know, he was away, and so, but you just hear about him, you know, because being a CME, you hear about Thomas Hoyt. He's a wonderful guy. He's scholarly, and I don't care what circles you go in, whether it was United Methodist, whether it was the Koji, everybody. Hoyt. And so you grow up knowing about him, mother talking about him. She said that matter of fact, he was a premature baby. So
he was.
Right. And so my mother said that my grandmother had to hold him on a pillow because he was just that small.
Wow.
And then here he grows up to be about 6'4", 6'5".
6'4", about 6'4".
And he was a premier and a scholar.
Yeah.
And back in those days, you know, premiers didn't, you know, their ability to live wasn't there because of medicine and
right. They didn't have all.
He grows up to be this wonderful person.
Isn't that amazing?
Love and respect today.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, Steve, hang around for a while. I'm gonna bring you back in. I want to share with Doria and Thomas. I know they nearby somewhere.
Yeah, you know they over here.
We here. We just can't fit all in the camera.
Just can't fit in the camera, but we're here.
Let us see your beautiful faces. Hold on just a second here. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, here we go.
Okay.
All right.
Hey, can y'all hear me okay?
We can hear you real good.
What a beautiful picture. Tell us about your dad. I'm gonna put a few pictures up. And Doria has sent me about 1,000 pictures.
Did I send you enough?
She got plenty of pictures.
She got plenty of pictures, and she's so sweet. She said, I hope you don't mind. I'm just gonna send a few more pictures.
I was hoping I didn't do too much. But
I said send them right on. But tell us about your dad. I think this is a cute woman.
Well, what I would have to say about my dad, I guess, the thing is about him, everybody, knows my dad is, Bishop Hoyt, the scholar, the preacher, the doctor, but what some people really don't know with us, we know him as / comedian.
Right.
And, he was really funny. I mean, we had time, but he was serious and always, one thing I can say about him, he really cares about people. He loved to see him in church.
Yes.
He loved, everybody around him. He always would try to help anyone he could. He'd help a flea. We always say he would help a flea if he could. That's how big his heart is. Yes, if he could, he would do that. But to us, he of course, like I say, I am a daddy's girl too. So I miss him dearly, but he would always instill in us to be the best at what we anything that we did. He tried to encourage us in anything. And I know I had a few instances, some things that I really tried for. It was really because he and mom actually, but dad would I didn't think I could do it, but the way he would encourage me, it's like I could do anything, so but he was just always that kind of person to just try to make you do your best. And just to us he was dad, even though we shared him a lot. To us he was dad.
Yes, indeed.
But I'm gonna let Tom talk a little bit.
Yeah, Tom.
All right, yeah, my dad, something a lot of people probably don't know about him is he's very competitive. He likes sports. A lot of people probably don't know that. And when growing up, we would go bowling a lot. Like every week we'd go bowling. I remember that vividly. We go bowling like every Friday. And it's just something that, he loved to do. Even though he worked all the time, he would still like to bowl every week. And so
now, did your mama
go? What's that?
Did your mama bowl?
Yeah.
Oh yes,
I both started bowling when I was probably like 9, 10 years old.
Really? Okay.
And we bowl every week, so I started loving to do it. So it's something that it was relaxing to him.
That was his only sport.
But he just liked to do it.
He loved bowling. Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing, my dad he got me business minded. He get in all kind of different things. He didn't have time to do them.
Okay.
But he tried to tell me and show me different things, and the older I got, the more I wanted to get into business and do different things dealing with business. So
yeah,
something that it helped out. The older I got, that he showed me, that's something I could do.
I would imagine you all followed behind him and your mother a lot at preaching engagements and.
Yeah, we stayed in church.
Yes. We went to church. That we did, and I think that actually helped.
Yeah,
I have to say, honestly, to me, it helped a lot as far as me being able to just not really be.
So we can see you, sweetheart. Lean in.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, but I was gonna say, yes, we did go to church quite a bit, and we didn't. They weren't really forceful about it, but we didn't mind. We enjoyed it because we really enjoyed church, and it really did help. For me, it helped me to, have a little more courage to get up and do a lot of things as far as even speaking, getting in front of different people, or just a lot. And I know we went, especially in Phillips, when we attended Phillips See-Me Church in Hartford, Connecticut. I know that really brought me out. I thought you'd think I would be. I'm pretty much still shy a little bit, but I'm not as shy as I used to be. But it just kind of brought me out. A lot of things. So yeah, the church really. Helped me in a lot of different ways. So, but we love, church still do.
Still do.
It's instilled in us. Yeah.
So tell us about the dynamics between your mom and daddy, because your mama's a hoot. You already
You really,
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Dynamic.
Yeah, wow. That's a good
start with that.
The two of them were together because she keeps us, we don't know what may come out, but we know it's gonna come out.
Yeah,
very true. They, like I say, I really think they have a beautiful, they had a very beautiful relationship, very long lasting relationship. Like you say, Dad kind of was a laid back, kind of calm. Mom is just like, yeah, Mama's a spitfire. She just, that's what she is. She's gonna say what's on her mind. But she's got a big heart. She loves everybody. She's a sweetheart, and they just kind of like, I guess they balanced each other out. They had their own unique ways of, doing things, but at the end of the day, you could tell I said it's gonna be, I would wish one day I could find, a relationship as strong as theirs, as lasting as theirs actually were, so they balanced each other out very well.
Balanced each other out. Yes, indeed. And so, and this is for all of you. Do you remember the time when your dad and your husband was preparing to run for bishop? Now, how did he just off himself? Did people come up to him and say, Reverend Hart, you should run for bishop? How did that happen, Mama Olsey?
You know what happened is the bishop. Okay, you just talked to the Johnson family.
Yes.
Well, Thomas Hoyt was in Bishop Johnson's class.
Yes.
At ITC.
That's right.
And he was his mentor. And evidently Bishop Johnson saw in him what he liked, and he always encouraged him to keep going. And then as the bishops got to know him, they all encouraged him to stay in school. And and everywhere he went, he left ITC, he went to Union in New York, and when he went to ITC, you could only get the BD. He got a Bachelor of Divinity.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, 5 or 6 years later, they converted that degree.
Okay.
But see, he didn't know that. So he went to Union and he received STM. That's a Master's of Sacred Theology.
Yeah.
He went to Union in New York. And then from Union in New York, one of his professors was going to Duke University in North Carolina and invited him. He said, Hoyt, why don't you come and go down to Carolina with me? Okay, Bishop Broomfield, I believe it was, assigned him to St. Joseph in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Okay.
So that he could go to Duke University, because Duke was only 8 miles from Chapel Hill. And that's where he received his PhD. He was one of a few, I don't know whether, he was the first Black guy to receive a PhD from Duke University in New Testament, because almost everybody went into theology because they could not deal with the languages. There were about 7 languages in New Testament, and most people just left that alone.
Right.
And so he ended up teaching Greek and Hebrew, but most people wouldn't go into New Testament, and so he went right behind Bishop Johnson, and and everywhere he would go, guess what?
What?
We didn't pay school bills. He had scholarships and fellowships. We didn't pay no school bills. He all the way through school, he received scholarships and fellowships.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he never had to pay one dime, even though the bishops urged him to go to school. Just go, because we want you to follow Bishop Johnson as a scholar on the bench.
Oh, wow.
And so that's what his aim was, to be a bishop in the CME Church and to receive a PhD from Duke University. And he did both.
And he accomplished both of those.
In 1975, he received that PhD.
That's amazing. Well, I want to just pause for a second to let you know that Senior Bishop Reddick and Sister Wendy Jones Reddick are watching, and they send
hey. You know, I love them so much.
I know you do. I know you do. Well, I want to bring up the great dean of D. Phillips School of Theology. You know him.
Oh man! Oh no! That's one of my children. One of my children.
I know that. I knew that, and I thought it was.
Hey, mama.
Oh no, he didn't. I got so many sons. I don't know where I got them from.
You know which ones are in the right order. You can have them. Okay, but Dean, we're so glad to have you, Dr. Paul, distinguished dean of my seminary, my alma mater ×2. Dr. Brown, Dean Brown, tell us, when did you first meet Bishop Hoyt, and just tell us a little bit about the relationship that you had.
I actually met Bishop Hoyt when they were members of Phillips in Hartford, when a man by the name of Austin Harrell pastored that church for a brief time. That's actually where my very first time I met him, and I believe that was in 1982. When I first met him. I heard the kids talking about how Bishop Hoyt was a comedian. Bishop Hoyt was a troublemaker. He was
devilish.
He was right. That's the word. He was devilish.
He was devilish.
And he would just pick on you. And the thing that used to annoy me with Bishop Hoyt, when we'd be driving somewhere, we'd listen to some gospel song, and he would always theologize the song.
Okay.
You know, it was one song that Donnie McClurkin made, Never Would Have Made It, or something like that. And Bishop had something to say about every single song that came on the radio. And then I remember he heard the song, I'm coming up the rough side of the mountain. What side of the mountain ain't rough? You know, and he said, y'all don't know what y'all singing. And then he said, I get tired of them 7-Eleven songs. You know, a song that has seven words, you sing 11 verses 11 times. That he would say stuff like that. And you just could not stop laughing. That man was, you asked me, I'm telling you, when they would go on a trip, when him and Oski would go somewhere, you know, as his administrative assistant, I have to take them to the airport, pick them up, or take them wherever they're going. And it was always a task because they had about 50 pieces of luggage. That's why my back is bad now.
You had to work, man.
Oh, man. And Skip, let me tell you this one story. And Oski, you know what I'm getting ready to say. Bishop Hoyt, he loved his cell phone. I mean, and he take that phone everywhere. And OC used to get so mad with him, and so he was packing all these luggages, and he couldn't find his cell phone. And he was rushing OC, but then when OC got finally ready to go, she's in the car. He can't find his cell phone. She said, "Thomas, I'm so sick of that damn cell."
I had a few nice words.
We on Facebook Live, so I can't say that. So what happened? Bishop said, "Paul, dial my cell phone," and I dialed. He couldn't find it, so Osi went back in the house, opened one of those luggages, and here's your daggone. Oh my God! I just love
Bishop Hoyt, I tell you.
Yeah, right. Poor Bishop Hoyt, because OC let him have it. Oh my God!
They had to take up for him all the time.
But let me say this: with one thing that Bishop told me that he loved about his wife, that she had a ministry that was very unique. Whenever someone was going through something, Mrs. Hoyt would always sit in the back of the car, and I thought she was asleep. But she was back there writing. Handwriting letters to people who did things for them. And they would be so beautiful, Skip. And people used to love getting letters from Mrs. Hoyt. That's what her gift was. It was a beauty. To get the kind of letter from Mrs. Hoyt that was personalized and handwritten was something special. And she would always put something in the card for you.
And she's still doing it.
I got to give you a little change.
She is still writing the most beautiful, and she has beautiful penmanship.
Exactly.
Not like I used to. I'm old now.
It's gonna always be a piece of change in that envelope.
Always. Two things that you're gonna get from the Hoyt family. You're gonna get a night of bowling. And Mr. Hoyt would bowl, and he would kick his leg. He would kick his foot.
Right.
You know, when he let the ball go, he kicked that foot. That was his form. And then when we got finished bowling, we'd always go to the Golden Corral.
And he loved he loved all them cafeterias.
Yes, Lord.
He didn't like no sophisticated place. He wanted to go to the cafeteria.
Cafeterias.
Get a piece of chicken, Skip. Now, a breast, he wouldn't pick it up. He used a fork and pull it apart.
He loved
and he held a napkin in his hand. He had a little napkin in his right hand and left hand, and he talked to you while he just rubbing that napkin.
He loved the breast. You couldn't give him no piece of chicken but the breast.
That's right. He loved that breast.
I say, I wonder why.
What I loved about Bishop Hoyt is the fact that he always had time for the common person.
Oh,
yes.
If he went to dinner, he didn't go to dinner with bishops. He went to dinner
with the people.
With anybody.
Congress. That was just, and for somebody that growing up and knowing how important he was to the church, and academia, and and for him to have that kind of time, it's like
good point, Steve.
If you talk to him, it's as if you're the only person in the room.
Let me say this too. Let me piggyback on what Stephen is saying.
And I just, I love that about him. That sense of humility that he had, and there are many stories that I know that he would take a second seat.
That's right.
He was always invited to places, and a lot of times, he didn't want to be, out there by himself, and so he invited other folk. And rather than him going and being invited, he said, "Why don't you invite somebody else?" As one of his colleagues or what have you. And that's the kind of person that I grew up knowing him,
right there.
And just always had time for people.
Wow.
I remember once he came to Thurgood, and I was a young president at the local church, and I wanted to bring him there, and he came and stayed in my house, my little bitty house, that I had, and he was like he had like it was a mansion. I mean, he was just that kind of person, and he went and taught that whole weekend. They loved him. He spoke that morning, and I didn't know that he and I have the same birthday.
Wow.
It was only when he came to Thurgood to speak for me. I asked him to come and speak, and he came, and I was introducing him, and I said, "My God!" I said, "We were born on the same day." So I said, for him to be my favorite uncle, then for to be born on his birthday was really special to me.
And let me say this, to piggyback what Steve is saying about, he really loved the people. When you had an annual conference with Bishop Hoyt, you needed to bring a packed lunch because nowhere. He would take his time with everybody. If somebody was giving a report, he made sure that report was read and heard by everybody.
Wow.
And I really appreciate it. And that's why a lot of times his meetings went long, because he never cut anybody off, even if they went contrary to what he was doing. Right. When people would argue and contest him, he would always respect their voice. And I remember an incident, I don't want to get too detailed with it, but after the thing was over, I could see the frustration on his face when I got him back to his room.
Right.
And I asked him, I said, "Bishop, why did you let that person do that to you?" And he said, "Paul, everybody has a voice and they need to be heard. And you can't stop somebody from wanting to speak." He said, "That's people have a right to be identified. Their humanity is everything." And I never forgot that about him.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Well, let's talk about now the time he was running for bishop and when he got elected. I know you all remember.
And yes, Lord. Yes, Lord.
That time that he offered himself as a candidate for bishop. Let me put this up.
1994.
Tell us about that time and how did the camp? Well, he obviously won, but how did the campaign go?
The campaign. Well, listen. Like I said, the bishops wanted him to be on the bench.
Okay.
So he was gonna get on the bench. but so they had prepped him for years. They had sent him all through school and everywhere because they wanted him to be after Bishop Johnson. They wanted him to be the scholar on the bench.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
think
that.
I
mean, he ran, and when he ran, I think he won on the first ballot.
He did. I think
he won on the first ballot, and then I think Bishop Helton won on about the third or fourth.
Right.
But they were best of friends.
That's right.
Yeah.
They won the same year.
Wow.
We should
and that was 1994.
94.
We should also say that his church, his home church, Hartford, Philip CME Church, was very instrumental in really supporting him. Printing Bishop Walker, they worked very hard to help him get elected as well.
You know, in it, and you all are far more seasoned in the church politics than I am, but that's unusual for, I think, a candidate to be so well liked by almost everybody on the bench.
That's difficult.
He was.
That they want him. I mean, I know bishops probably tend to have a candidate or candidates of their choice, you know, but to have one that was so well loved and respected and liked by most of them on the bench.
They all wanted him to become bishop, and he, you know, he did what they wanted him to do. Bishop B. Julian Smith, Bishop Doyle, they all saw something in him, and they wanted him to become a bishop.
Wow.
And then he started to want to, and so he got in easily. But he's just good with people. But what Paul was telling you, you know what he would do? He'd stay in conference from sun up to sundown.
That's right.
And so I would go in conference, and I would sit anywhere in a conference.
Listen.
And so I sat by later one day. She said, "Oh, I really need to get something out of my car, but I can't go because Bishop is talking." I said, "Come in, let me tell you something." She didn't know who I was.
Right.
I said, "You ease out the side over there." And I said, "You go out there and you come back and you ease back in, and you get at the end of the service," because he'll still be up there.
Right.
I said, "You go get what you got to get, because he's gonna be there." So at the end of the service, they said, he says, "OCR, is Mrs. Hoyt in here anywhere?" And I took a minute and I stood up. That lady said, "You wrong for that." Because I sit anywhere. I don't have no spare. I'll sit with anybody.
You went on the front row with a corsage around your
No, Bishop Hoyt told me, let me tell you, I was banned from the first row. Wow. because when he said I was when he went to St. Joseph in Chapel Hill, we were wearing mini dresses. And my mini dress was all the way up there. And so they were wearing mini dresses, and Bishop and Welter were good friends. Love Henry, Welter were good friends. And they were riding up there on University of North Carolina campus, and they wrecked my car looking at some girl. The guy had on a mini dress. But he told me, "Don't you sit up on the front seat disturbing people, because I don't want nobody to see you sitting up there, because you don't know how to sit." He told me, "Don't you sit on those front seat."
Oh, Lord Jesus.
I'm wiped out for the rest of the show, y'all. That's too much.
It's over, Skip.
Oh my goodness. What my next question is, Lord,
I want to share with you a story he shared with me. He was, I think he was working on his PhD, and he went out to Mount Pleasant, I think, out in Denver somewhere. And he tells a story about how he was there to work with the youth while he was writing his dissertation, what have you. And so they were there for that summer. This is in the 60s. And they had invited, they had a pool party. And did not invite him because this was a Presbyterian church that he was working with. And they didn't invite him because they didn't think how the people would react to that in that neighborhood, and said at the end of his tenure there that summer, he said that they had a going away thing. They said, you know, Thomas, if all black folk were like me, he said I could accept them. If all black folk were like you, so I could accept them. And he said, he told them, if all white folk were like me, I could accept them too. So, that's the boldness of that, and just understanding that he knew that he had been privy to some things that other folk were not privy to. He wasn't the smartest, but he knew that there were other folk who didn't have the opportunity that he had. He was in a position where he took advantage of those opportunities, but he also knew that he didn't want anybody to put him on a pedestal, because he knew that there were other folk was just as brilliant as he was, but just didn't have the opportunity.
Didn't have the help. He got all kind of help.
Skip, let me follow up to what Stephen just said, because someone wrote in the chat there about how Bishop was well respected in ecumenical circles, because Bishop Boyd was an ecumenist.
Oh yeah, he was big in ecumenical.
The one thing that sticks out with me with Bishop Boyd that I'll never forget, he told me that he was given an opportunity to speak at one of their national meetings, and he preached a sermon entitled "Is You Is or Is You Ain't My Baby."
That's right.
And that, he really theologically created the argument. He theologically cussed those white people out in that sermon. And in a matter of speaking, that's what it is. Is you is or is you ain't my baby. It's on record. Check it out. One of the greatest sermons ever preached that put white people in their place as it relates to African Americans in theology in this country.
That's amazing.
And he got a chance 30 years later, after his introduction to the Presbyterian Church. 30 years later, he's speaking at their National Assembly.
Come on now.
He gets to tell them who they were. He said, but you're much better now. And he
That's right. That's right.
What they did in those times. He said, but I want you to know that you're much better now than you were. And I said, only God would set that up. That you would have an opportunity, that folks had a different attitude. You know, the same stuff that we're dealing with now. Racism is institutional. So, but God had put him in some places where he could dismantle those folk when they don't even know it. And that's the kind of person he was. And I just, I don't love that about him.
He was real big in the ecumenical world, but he also was president of the National Council of Churches. And then he was first vice president of the World Methodist Council. He loved the ecumenical stuff. He was always all over the world with the ecumenical. The last meeting I told him he couldn't go to.
Really?
I have to. No. That was up near the end, and he wasn't. He would go to the doctor only if he had to. And I said to him, I said, no, you. It was in Korea. I said, you are not going to Korea because I'm not coming over there to get you. Because I said, you need to go to the doctor. And sure enough, I didn't know it was going to happen. But when he went to that third summit, he was saying, we had run. I said, do not go down there. He was senior bishop. I said, do not go down there and stay all day and run up here when the session starts tonight.
Okay.
I said, do not do that. Don't you come up here running.
Right.
Sure enough, he came up there running. But we had to walk all the way across that Galleria back to open the service at the third summit. And he had to be back over there to open the service.
Yeah.
Well, he was just singing and singing. He was sitting up on the front row with the other bishops and all, and singing and singing and singing his head off, and just as happy as he could be, because he loved meetings and he loved services. And that's when he died. He died singing.
I was there in Texas.
He died sitting up there singing, and Bishop Lakey looked at him, and we didn't even know he was dead, and he was sitting up straight.
Wow. That's amazing. That is amazing.
And Skip, he was also invited to the Vatican to meet.
Yeah. Well, he got some Pope pictures.
Two blind
I got
invited.
No.
Cousin and Bishop Hoyt.
That is.
That picture.
Yeah.
That's that picture.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
He went to shake his hand simply because they didn't want nobody near that Pope.
Yeah, right.
And people couldn't just walk up and shake his hand. He asked, could he speak to the New Testament scholar?
Oh.
Do you hear me?
He wanted to speak to him.
Listen, and he got a Bible signed by the Pope.
Yeah, signed by him. I have it upstairs.
That's right.
I have it upstairs.
Wow.
When he told me that story, I said, man, that's bold. And I said, but sometimes God teaches us to be bold, not in our name, but in his name.
In his name.
And for the Pope to oblige him. And
the Pope wanted to see him.
Got upset because the Pope didn't sign anybody else's Bible.
That's exactly right.
He didn't sign no Bibles.
Right.
That's exactly right.
She got one signed by the Pope.
That is truly a testament to him. And so, what God, his legacy is tremendous. He was a scholar, theologian, so humble. Dean, I know you have a large collection of his books as a part of the Phillips School of Theology's library.
That's correct.
And that's great that has been preserved. But what do you all think is his lasting legacy? As a bishop, a humanitarian. What is that thing? We're in our 150th year of a church. When Thomas Hoyt's name comes up, what should immediately come to our mind?
A fanatical ecumenist.
Honor.
Right.
I've never seen, and no disrespect to any other bishops, present or past, but I don't think I've seen a bishop that has the type of, well, all of them. There's something there. I can't say that, but let me just say about Bishop Hoyt. When you think of him, he is a man of honor. Mm-hmm. He is a person who will give you his last.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Almost to a fault. And there's one story I want to share with you, and then I'll be done. And this is a true story. And OC was sitting in the back seat when this happened. We were driving home from a funeral of his secretary in Washington, D.C. And we got a phone call. It was from a preacher who was calling about another preacher who was in a very difficult situation and for whatever reason had gotten himself locked up over the weekend. And if you know anything about getting locked up on a Friday, they're not going to let you out until Saturday. Well, this young man had a church. Bishop Hoyt told me to stop at a bank. Bishop Hoyt went into that bank and took out a cash withdrawal and wired that money to this other preacher so they can get that preacher out of jail.
My goodness.
True story. That's the type of bishop he was.
Yeah, and I've been at ITC, and he had students that were from Mississippi when he was in Mississippi, and there was not one that didn't get money from Bishop Hoyt. He would just go in his pocket and just give it. I said, what a great
whatever
man.
he had.
Whatever he had. That's right. He shared it.
And one thing about him, I'm going to tell you the truth. I cannot remember ever hearing him. I don't care what kind of situation it was, good, bad, or ugly. I have never heard the man talk about anybody negatively.
Wow.
He didn't talk, and guess what?
What?
I didn't have nobody to help me. He didn't let me talk about nobody. He did not talk. He didn't talk negative. I don't care what. He didn't talk about people. I never heard him talk about anybody mean-spirited.
Wow.
Never heard him say a bad word about anybody. And I know a lot of things. I would see different things, but he did not look. If it was negative, he didn't talk about it, and wouldn't let you talk about it because he wasn't gonna talk about it.
Wow.
I think the dean can attest to this. You could be telling him something, and you know he knows the Bible back and forth.
Yeah.
You share with him like you really got something going on.
Mm-hmm.
Make you feel like you got something going on.
Yeah.
Like you revealing something to him, when in fact he that's the way he was. He wanted you to know that you had a part in whatever it is that God had called you to do, and I just respect that, and that really has helped to shape me, and I'm a big man. He was tall. I'm tall, but I have learned to temper that, because sometimes we go in places and folk automatically want to call you up to the front or whatever, and I try to go in the back first. And I do that on purpose, because you got to learn how to be humble.
That's right.
And I think he embodied humility.
I don't know many people was as humble. But what you saw out in public, that's the way he was everywhere.
Yes.
He didn't change. And I never saw him change. I really actually was married to him 49, almost 50 years. Wow. And I really never saw him have a temper tantrum. I just didn't see him get angry about very much of anything. He didn't get angry.
Except that one time. Except that one time in the airport, OC.
Oh,
no, we can't tell that one.
No,
wait a minute. Wait a minute. I'll clean it up. We will walk.
She told me the raw version earlier, but yeah, clean it up, Mama. Clean it up.
I'm gonna clean it up. We were going to. I said, I am so sick of you getting me up early in the morning to go to this airport. You're getting on my last nerve, and as we were walking along, you know how tall he was. I was just to his waist. You know how tall he was. But I'm fussing, and we just going down the corridor in the airport, and I'm just fussing. I am so sick of you. You getting on my last nerve. And I just kept talking, and he wasn't saying nothing. After a while, he looked down at me. I said, I'm hungry. I need some food. I'm hungry. He looked down at me. He said, I'm going to let you fill in the blank. Blank, be quiet. It's some food down the corridor. I said, no, you didn't. I know you didn't say that to me. I know you don't even know what the word means. I said, next time you say that word again, let me teach you how to say it. I said, because I don't know no. I said, because I don't know no nice ones. But he was real funny though. He was really a nice person.
Lord have mercy.
He was a comedian.
He was a comedian, but y'all, Skip, he loved OC. I know he did. Make no mistake about it. He loved OC.
Absolutely.
Like to hear me cutting up.
Yes, Lord, I tell you. Well, this has been wonderful. Mama OC, do you remember your West Side days?
Yeah, I love. Okay, I think West Side. Okay, first of all, you didn't know I wasn't in y'all's ranks. I am a Baptist. I was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, at 16th Street Baptist Church.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the Lord kept me here for, but Anyway, I went to Lane in 1960, and the girls that got blown away the Sunday after I left going to school were my friends. And I was a member of 16th Street Baptist Church. So when I married Thomas Hoyt, I said, I don't have, somebody said, you mean you're going to leave the Baptist church? I said, I don't have no problem leaving the Baptist church. Long as they believe Jesus, I go to anybody's church. And so that's how I ended up being at Westside. When he came to ITC, we had just gotten married.
Okay.
And then he, I think he worked with Reverend Dobson.
Yes.
He worked with Reverend Dobson.
Yes.
And when he came to Westside, I just joined the CME church.
Yes.
And then we were in and out of Westside. We went first time he was in school. Second time we came back for him to teach. And every time I would come back, I would go straight to Westside. And I just love Westside.
Well, Westside loves you and your pastor, my friend and classmate, Reverend Andre Lloyd. My mama loves you. You know, at Westside, they still got their own reserved seats. You know that. My mama been sitting in that same spot for 50 years. And
he got a real mama and another mama. I said, boy, you got too many mamas.
I got a bunch of mamas. But I brought up Westside because growing up in Westside, as a little boy, we learned this song. Drinking of the wine.
That was his favorite.
Y'all hold on a second.
Speed it up just a little bit.
Okay, well, how about this? Why don't we let the great Bishop?
Oh Lord, you got that thing on tape.
That was his communion.
That was it.
Lord,
I tell you,
everybody say, when you gonna sing that wine song?
I tell you, I hear that song, and I mean, it just takes me back to my childhood and some wonderful days at Westside. But Doria and Thomas, stick your head in. And also, Mama Olsey, Bishop Marshall Gilmore and Sister Yvonne Gilmore are watching.
All right.
And I wanted you to know that.
I love the Gilmores. They are my favorite.
And there may be other bishops watching. I'm only able to see what I can see, but if they are, let me say hello to all of you.
Please do, please.
All of you, thank you so much for sharing with us. This has been a blast.
I had a good time.
If I didn't have church members watching, I would say, you know what? When we finish, I'm going to get me a glass of wine.
Do what you gotta do, yeah.
And I may still do that. Drink another wine. Yes.
You're gonna need some wine when you get through with us.
Well, this has just been a joy and a delight, and I'm so grateful to all of you for spending a little time. I know Bishop has to be smiling. And for me personally, on a personal note, what an honor it was for me as a seminarian to serve as one of the pallbearers for Bishop Pope. In fact, I'm getting so full now I can hardly just get through it. Just an honor, Mama Olsen. You have just been a joy. I'm one of her recent sons of the last 5 years, but she has just taken me in like her. And plus, I spent 7 hours in a car with her. We were coming back from a what were we coming back from? Some conference in Memphis, and Andre was in the car. Nobody could sleep because she talked all the way down the road.
She did that with y'all.
And then it was late, went in and just saw the great tour, and I saw this beautiful thing, and I just felt so blessed, just tremendously blessed.
And let me tell you one other thing. I love Thomas Hoyt more than I loved anybody.
I know,
but
honey.
Anyway, they had 1, 2, 3 funerals. I mean, 1 funeral and 2 memorials for them.
That's right. That's right.
So when we got ready to come back, when we got ready to move out of the Episcopal residence in D.C., his picture was sitting in the dining room.
Mm-hmm.
And I went over to his picture and I said, "Hey, honey, we ain't having no more funerals now. We done had enough. 3 is enough.
3 is enough.
3 is enough." And so my cell phone rang and it was over on the bed. And when I went over there to get it, it said Thomas Hoyt. I said, "You better not be on this line when I answer." But he was joy. And Skip, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I enjoyed being a part of your. Because I look at you every week.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm looking so forward to continuing. But you all were just a delight. Let me just say quickly before we leave, tomorrow night we have the family of Bishop William Henry Grave.
Yes.
Join us, and this weekend on Sunday at 5 o'clock we have the son of Bishop Norris Curry. We have the son of Bishop R.O. And we have the son of Bishop Caesar Coleman. And then we have the sons of Dotsy Ivertus Isom on this Sunday for our Father's Day remembrance. So I invite all of you to come and to share. But it has been a joy to be with the Hoyt family.
Thank you. Same here. We wanted you to have a little fun today.
Well, I did.
And Skip, if I could say this, I just want to thank Doria and Thomas for sharing their father with us.
Thank you.
I think much can be said about their sense of sharing.
Yeah.
And,
thank you.
Appreciate
that. Thank you.
What he needed to be to us as a church, as a community, and as a family. And so I want to say kudos and thank you, Anna Olsen, for taking care of him and allowing him to be the person that we know and we celebrate even now.
And Skip,
and I just thank God for that.
And Skip, can I just say this too? I need to shout out the College of Bishops, because when Bishop Hoyt transitioned, I mean, that entire college came together.
Yes.
And I had never seen anything like that. And I really appreciate how they handled his transition. And we need to give God praise for the College of Bishops.
I love every one of them dearly.
Thank you. A great community of bishops.
Amen. Thank you, man, for everything, Skip. Excellent.
You all are welcome. Thank you. And I'm so appreciative. Good to see my boy Mark Somerville on this evening.
Hey, Mark. I love Mark.
Yes.
Tell him I might come to Sunday school.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I tell you. Well,
love you, Mama.
I think no other way for us to leave out this evening than to continue to celebrate drinking of the wine. Y'all take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Last night, everybody.
Love everybody. Bye-bye.
Love y'all.
All right, brothers, you all take care and have a blessed evening.
Peace.
You too. God bless.
Peace.
God bless you as well. All right.
Mm-hmm.